Hello everybody and welcome to part 21 of Kerbal Space Program. The journey continues. You join us in space with our interplanetary craft, the Galileo, about 80 in-game days after we last met. The Galileo is now most of the way to Moho, and as per usual with this kind of mission, it's about this time that I like to check in with the craft, just to see how the crew are getting on, but mainly to see if we need to perform any kind of course correction manoeuvre. In this case we do, but as I've mentioned in previous episodes, the Delta V margins on this mission are incredibly narrow, so we need to be very aware of that as we're plotting our approach. Switching to map view then, we're not going to use a manoeuvre node for this or fire up our main engines. We're far enough out that we should be able to do this easily and cheaply enough with monopropellant. Now, in terms of setting up the orbit, the most fuel-efficient strategy overall is to come in as low as we are going to get, and then circularise from there. But there's a couple of problems with that. First of all, it's going to mean more Delta V in that initial burn. We're going to have to start burning further away from the manoeuvre node. It's probably going to drop our periapsis by quite a bit, so we need to factor in a margin there. Secondly, we might be able to get away without doing a plane change manoeuvre. I've got a couple of things I need to check first, but at this stage I need to leave that option open, and of course plane change manoeuvres are at their most efficient. They're cheapest in Delta V terms when you are as far away from the planet as possible. To address this then, I'm going to try and set us up into a highly elliptical orbit where either the ascending node or the descending node is as close as possible to the apoapsis of that orbit. But only time will tell how successful at that I've actually been. With that all set up then, the Galileo is ready for its encounter with Moho, which will happen in about 30 days or so. And now we briefly switch our attention back to Kerbin because we have a bit of business to take care of a little closer to home. So we turn our attention to our space station, the Socrates, where our scientists have been busy beavering away and have now accrued the 2,000 science necessary to fill that science lab up to the brim, so we get that transmitting back down to Kerbin. With this science, we can now unlock the engine I've been eyeing up for our next generation of interplanetary vehicles, and that's kind of got me thinking about what I said last episode about how we're going to do our science from here on in. Last time I said that when the Ptolemy arrives back from Ike, we'll probably keep most of the experiments up here to be processed by the orbital lab rather than take them back down to the surface for immediate science. Now I'm not so sure. The Galileo won't be far behind the Ptolemy, and we'll be doing our science a little bit differently with the Galileo, but obviously we'll get onto that in a minute. The upshot of all this is that I am probably going to take most of the experiments from the Ptolemy straight back down to Kerbin, cash them in immediately, hopefully get some new goodies for our upcoming vehicle. But anyway, I think we have finished our little interlude here. Let's get back to the Moho mission. So we follow the Galileo in on its approach to Moho. I've done that checking now. It turns out we don't need to perform a plane change manoeuvre. In fact, on our current orbital inclination, our transfer burn back to Kerbin is much cheaper than it would be on a zero inclination orbit. It does mean that our transfer window opens a little bit later and our journey time will be a little bit longer, so we won't be back at Kerbin as soon as I'd hoped. But given that my concern with this mission was always the fuel, this counts as very good news in my books. Arriving within Moho's sphere of influence, we have to get the craft set up for the manoeuvre reasonably quickly. It's a long burn and a short encounter, so we don't have quite the wiggle room we have with some of these other missions. And at 21 minutes and 43 seconds to our manoeuvre node, we light up those engines and begin our deceleration. I made a bit of a mistake earlier when I talked about our periapsis lowering as we were performing the manoeuvre. That's if you're burning retrograde. If you're burning along the line of the manoeuvre node, as we are here, especially on a long manoeuvre like this, particularly the tail end of that manoeuvre is likely to raise the periapsis higher than it actually was to begin with. I do alter our heading towards the tail end of the burn to bring our periapsis down. There were more fuel-efficient ways I could have done this. In general, it would have been fair to say I didn't have my orbital mechanics head on while I was playing through this. Having established our elliptical orbit, we fly up to apoapsis, where we can very cheaply fine-tune our periapsis using monopropellant, before we follow the craft down to periapsis, where we're going to circularise our orbit with a burn of nearly 300 meters per second of delta V. At this stage, our delta V indicator shows a little under 4,900 meters per second of delta V, and that's only going to increase as we launch missions down to the surface and expend some of that lander fuel, which is not taken into consideration on that readout. But anyway, I think it's time to get on with what we came here to do. So we begin our initial science sweep of Moho in space high above the planet. I did say earlier we were going to be doing our science a little bit differently, and it's not that different. We're just going to be taking 2 copies of everything. One for the space station, one to take back down to the surface of Kerbin. The mystery goo containers are kind of an exception here because you don't just want to take one result back. That doesn't quite get you the full whack of science. Ideally, you'd like to take 2, so we're taking 3 in orbit of Moho here, getting Bob Kerman out intermittently to reset some of those experiments, the goo containers and the materials bay, which also will need 2 readings from. While juggling all this science about trying to work out where everything goes, I do come across a crew report from around Eve, which I'd stored in the hitchhiker storage container and had obviously forgotten all about. So we get that stored in one of the main storage units. I will be using the hitchhiker storage container to store the 3rd mystery goo readings from the various locations, and then once all our science is done, transfer it all across to the command pod, if I remember. Who knows, maybe I'll find them at a later date while we're in orbit of Joule or something like that. We do perform a gravity sweep of Moho. Our orbit only takes us over 3 biomes, but it's not a huge worry as we've already sent a probe to Moho to do a full gravity sweep. This is just to give the orbital science lab aboard the Socrates a few extra experiments. And I think the negative gravioli detector is one of those experiments where you don't quite get the full load of science from just the one, so we'll take the duplicates back down to the KSC and hopefully get a little extra science from those. With that higher sweep completed then, it's time for us to drop our orbit and get ourselves another set of science readings, this time in space low over the planet. For Moho, the boundary between space high and space low is 80 kilometres. We're just going to drop down to 75. I'm using monopropellant for this. We're not going very far. It's a low gravity planet. It's not going to take a lot. And I would like to save as much conventional fuel as is possible for the transfer back to Kerbin. Because the gravity sweep is only 3 biomes, which all crop up fairly regularly, I decide to get that out of the way whilst we're on the night side of the planet before swinging round to the day side to get the rest of the experiments done. Now this goes by a lot smoother. I've sort of gotten myself into a rhythm by this point, so it's a lot more time efficient, and also we get to use the gamma ray spectrometer whilst we're in space low, which is one of the additional science experiments that comes with KSP Interstellar. With a little further assistance from Bob Kerman, then, we have gathered all of the readings, reports and samples that we are going to from space. So, once again, it is time for us to head down to the surface of a brand new planet. Valentina was the first down onto the surface of Juno, so this time Jebediah gets his turn to be the first to set foot on a brave new world. And he will, of course, be joined on this mission down by Bill and Bob. Having checked everything is in good working order, then we separate the lander and we're just going to use some monopropellant to lower our orbit down to 70 kilometres. It means we'll use a little less regular fuel on the way down. It also means we can be absolutely sure we've got a safe manoeuvring separation between ourselves and the Galileo. And now it is time for us to pick a landing site and head on down, but because it's a big occasion, I think we'll be doing this with some live commentary. Okay, let's get straight into this. Let's bring up the map view. I've got this already set up and lined up. We are going to be heading down into, well, hopefully heading down into this crater here. Let's get ourselves fast forwarded a little bit. Come on, till you're about there, I reckon. That's my lander, which for some reason is being shown as Socrates' ship. There. Right. Oh, I haven't enabled the fuel. That'll be handy. Activate our engine. Let's get that burning down. Maybe I was a little premature with that burn, but no, it's looking good. I don't know what I want to bring us down to. Where do we get the lip of that? Okay, we get the lip there. Let's bring ourselves all the way over. So that's 1153. Bring it up a little bit. I think I'm going to want a bit of a margin for error. Let's try 3.5. I'm getting a little twitchy about that. Let's bring it up a bit further. 3625. We should be okay. Okay, and we are on our way down. The reason I wanted to go to this crater is because we're going to need to land in 2 biomes. It's going to be a bit tricky to pick out the highlands from the midlands. So one of them was probably going to be one of the craters, which are a little easier to identify, and then just land wherever. So I decided I'll try and get the crater's biome out of the way first of all, then the next landing, if we do a next landing, because of course there is question marks over the Galileo's fuel, we can just set it down anywhere, and that should be good. Let's turn off node holding. Let's just time accelerate round. Down to 50 times. Down to 10 times. I'm not sure where the boundary is where we'll lose time acceleration altogether. But that's a pain in the backside, because it tends to be a little higher than you'd like every time. How are we doing? Coming up on 10,000 meters. Still no sign of the sun. There we go. And there we go. We have lost our time acceleration, and there's no 4 times on this planet, is there? Let's get ourselves pointing retrograde. So yeah, the third lot of live commentary this series. And possibly if I keep to the same routine I have been previously, I'll be doing this for the big landings. And there's only 2 of those left to come. Once we've landed here, we've got Eve and Dres left that I'm hopefully going to land some Kerbals on. Dres is going to be relatively straightforward. Eve, to put it mildly, will not. I'll have to get building our new interplanetary vehicle pretty soon, because, well, unless I want this whole series to drag on for an age. How are we doing? Some of that terrain getting a little bit closer. I don't know what this little pattern you get on the terrain is. I'm not sure if that's just a texture thing. Given the way it's lighting up, that might actually be something to do with the UV mapping. We'll have to see. How are we doing? Yeah, some of that terrain is looking very close. I will have to stow these solar panels just before we land. Yeah, interesting story. I came to detach the lander originally, and I realised it only had one solar panel. So obviously, when I constructed it, the symmetry wasn't on. So I had to take that off. It was one of the 3x2 panels we were using, same as we do with the other lander. And I had to get Bill out to take that off and just install 2 new ones from the spares we've taken on the mission. I did all that off camera. How are we doing? I'm assuming that's the lip of the crater coming up. I hope it is, because we are getting very low by this point. Oh, do come along. It would be nice, I think I've mentioned this before, if you could actually go up to like the 4 times time acceleration you can. The 4 times time acceleration you can in Kerbin's atmosphere, or some other planet's atmospheres, just to give you that extra notch on the way down, because it seems a bit silly that you can do that with some planets but not with others. Here we go then. Yeah, we're going to clear the lip of that crater quite easily. I'm just hoping this does actually give us the minor craters biome, because I don't know, the biome maps on Moho can be a little bit funny. Highlands. Really? So we're right over this thing and it's not giving us the correct biome. Oh, crap. Let's start slowing ourselves down then. Will you stop twisting about whilst I'm trying to... There we go. So that's a pain. If we're landing in the Midlands, I would just have to take a look at the get the landing gear down. Take a look at the biomaps, see if we can pick out. Now it's Highlands. Pick out whatever we don't land in this time around. I am going to stop burning there. And then we just arc over down towards the surface of Moho. Only our second planet this series. We're on, was it, episode 21 this time around? Have to try and knock Dres out the park pretty quickly, and then preparations for Eve. Let's notch that right down. We're still quite a distance up. You can see just on the terrain altitude there. Okay, let's start bringing it down now. There we go. Try and get this as slow as possible. Definitely below 3 meters per second. Oh, hopefully a little bit less. It all went a bit funny there, but we are down. Lovely stuff. Yeah, I don't know. We got down to 1.4 and started wobbling and lost the retrograde hold. But no harm done. We are safe and sound down on the surface of Moho. Let's extend our ladder. Good stuff. And now we will get Jebediah out to do the honours. Come on. There we go. My mouse is playing up. I do need a new one. But that can wait. Let's get you down. Down we go. Good stuff. Hello, Jebediah. Let's get your EVA report. It's getting very hot in here. I'm sure it is. Let's go and plant our flag. And for this, where are we? We're in the Moho Highlands. And for our text, I'm going to go for a very old reference, probably before your time, before my time as well. It ain't half hot, Mum. Good stuff. Okay, I think this landing has probably taken us long enough, so I think we should, just to tidy up the loose ends of this episode, we should probably switch back to the post-commentary. Yeah, that landing did take a lot longer than I was expecting, so I think we'll be drawing things to a close here and bumping everything else to the next episode. But not, of course, before Bob Kerman makes his way down to the surface to take that surface sample, and then Bill Kerman comes down the ladder to join his comrades on the surface, to admire the view and have a little bit of a jump around in Moho's reduced gravity. So that will be the end of today's episode. I hope you've enjoyed it, everybody. If you have, please consider liking, subscribing, and following me on Twitter, link in the description. Next time, of course, we'll have to finish all this off, and we've got plenty of other stuff to be getting on with. But until then, thanks for watching, take care, and I'll see you next time.